The Crooked Dancer. The rain-lashed cobblestones of Grimholt gleamed under the faltering glow of gas-lit street lamps, their light splintering across the wet stones like veins of dying ember, fragile and fleeting. Tucked in a shadowed fold of Europe, where maps seemed to forget its name, Grimholt was a labyrinth of serpentine alleys and sagging gabled houses, their shutters bolted against the night, their facades scarred by centuries of unspoken sins. The town lingered in a perpetual twilight, where time unraveled into a fog of dread, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth, rotting wood, and a sharp, metallic tang, like blood left to fester in the dark. Dusk Alley, the bleakest artery of Grimholt's heart, twisted through its core, its street lamps sparse and trembling, their amber light devoured by shadows that pulsed with a malevolent will, as if the darkness itself were alive, breathing, waiting. Livia Wren hurried down Dusk Alley, her boots slipping on the slick stones, her breath clouding in the biting cold that gnawed at her bones like a living thing. Her shift at the scrivener's shop had dragged past midnight, the relentless scratch of quill on parchment still echoing in her cramped, ink-stained hands, her fingers aching from hours of copying ledgers under flickering candlelight. The clock tower's chimes told 12, each note a cold claw raking her spine, reverberating through the empty streets like a warning. Her cloak, frayed and sodden, clung to her shoulders like a second skin, heavy with rain, and her satchel, stuffed with ink vials, a heel of stale bread, and a worn ledger, slapped against her hip with every hurried step. She cursed herself for choosing Dusk Alley over the safer, broader Guildstrasse, but it shaved precious minutes off her walk to the boarding house above the tanner's shop, a cramped attic room that felt like a distant sanctuary, a frail shield against the night. "Never again," she muttered, her voice swallowed by the wind's low wail, sharp with the promise of a gathering storm that seemed to press down on Grimholt like a lid on a coffin. Then she heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails scraping bone, deliberate and sharp, slithering from the shadows ahead, each tap a needle in her nerves. It was paired with a low, guttural hum, not a melody but a vibration, curling through the air like oil seeping into water, invasive and cold, wrapping around her heart. Livia froze, her pulse spiking, a primal fear tightening her chest until she could barely breathe. "Who's there?" she called, her voice thin, fraying in the oppressive silence that seemed to swallow sound itself. The tapping stopped. She strained her ears, catching only the drip of rainwater from a rusted eave and the distant creak of a shutter banging in the wind, a sound like a plea for release. A stray dog, she told herself, willing her legs to move, her boots scuffing the cobblestones, her hands trembling as she clutched her satchel. But the tapping resumed, closer, more insistent, the hum now a drone that pressed against her skull, urging her to listen, to sway, to step into its rhythm, as if it knew her name, her fears, her secrets. She rounded a corner and saw him. Under a flickering street lamp stood a figure, tall and skeletal, his tattered gray cloak flapping like a vulture's wings, its frayed edges trailing in the wind like ghostly fingers. His limbs were unnaturally long, bending at angles that mocked human anatomy, moving in a jerky, hypnotic dance, precise yet grotesque, like a marionette jerked by invisible, malevolent strings. His boots tapped the cobblestones, relentless beat that echoed through Dusk Alley, sharp as a heartbeat in a dying chest, each tap a nail driven into her nerves, a rhythm that seemed to pulse in her blood. His head was tilted back, face veiled in shadow, but as Livia stared, it snapped forward with a sickening crack that echoed like a breaking bone, a sound that made her stomach lurch. His skin was ashen, almost translucent, stretched taut over a skull too sharp, too angular, like something carved from wax and left to melt under a cruel sun. His eyes were wide, unblinking voids, gleaming with a feverish light that burned through her, piercing her soul, seeing every fear she'd ever buried. And his mouth, God, his mouth, stretched into a smile so wide it tore at the edges of his face, revealing a jagged maw of teeth, too many, too sharp, glinting like shards of ice under the lamplight, each tooth a promise of pain. The hum poured from him, a guttural chant that wasn't music but a summons, weaving through the air, tugging at Livia's limbs, her thoughts, her very being, urging her to move, to join him, to become part of his dance. Her breath caught, her body refusing to move, pinned by that smile, those eyes that saw into her, through her, to a place she didn't know existed, a place of raw, primal fear and surrender. The figure's gaze locked on hers, and his grin widened, impossible, obscene, stretching beyond what any face could hold, as if his flesh were a mask stretched over something not human, something ancient and hungry. He took a step toward her, his dance unbroken, his body lurching in a fluid, insectal motion, limbs twitching as if alive with their own will, each movement a mockery of life. The tapping grew louder, a frenzied rhythm that pulsed in her chest, and the hum became a weight, a pressure urging her to step forward, to join him, to lose herself in his dance, to let go of everything she was. "What are you?" Livia whispered, stumbling back, her satchel slipping to the ground, ink vials shattering in a puddle, black liquid seeping like blood across the cobblestones, staining her boots. Her voice was a thread, barely audible over the hum's relentless pull, which seemed to coil around her heart, squeezing until she gasped. He didn't answer. Instead, he laughed, a high, shrieking cackle, like metal grinding on bone, piercing her ears until they rang with pain, scraping her nerves raw, a sound that felt like it could unravel her mind. The laugh snapped her from her trance, and she ran, her boots skidding on the wet stones, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. The tapping followed, faster, closer, the hum wrapping around her like a noose, pulling at her thoughts, her will, urging her to turn back, to look at him, to see his smile again. Street lamps flickered as she passed, their light dimming, as if the darkness were a living thing, chasing her, ravenous, its hunger a tangible weight that pressed against her back. She darted down a side alley, her lungs burning, her vision blurring, and collided with someone, a scream tearing from her throat as hands grabbed her arms, strong and unyielding. "Livia. What's happened?" It was Soren Holt, the tanner who worked below her room, his face pale under his leather cap, his lantern casting a trembling glow that barely pierced the shadows. His hazel eyes were wide with concern, his calloused hands steady but tense, gripping her as if to anchor her to reality, the acrid stench of leather clinging to him like a second skin, grounding her amidst the terror. "There's something," Livia gasped, pointing behind her, her chest heaving, her voice ragged, barely her own. "A man, he's dancing. He's chasing me." Soren raised his lantern, peering into the alley, his breath catching, his hand tightening on the handle. "Where?" Livia turned, her breath hitching, her scar pulsing with a heat that wasn't hers. The alley was empty. The tapping had stopped, the hum gone. The street lamp at the corner flickered, then steadied, its light cold and unyielding, casting harsh shadows that seemed to shift just beyond her sight. No trace of the smiling figure, no sign of his presence except the ice in her veins and the burning crescent scar that bloomed on her palm, raw and pulsing, as if carved by an unseen blade, its edges jagged and angry. "He was there," she whispered, trembling, her hand clenching around the scar, the pain sharp and alien, a fire that seemed to speak. His face, Soren, his smile wasn't human. Soren's frown deepened, his gaze scanning the shadows, his lantern trembling slightly in his grip, betraying his unease. "You're shaking like a leaf, Livia. Let's get you home. Dusk alley's no place for midnight walks." "I saw him." Livia insisted, her voice cracking, desperation clawing at her throat. He was dancing under the lamp, and he laughed. It was wrong, Soren. Like nothing alive, like something that shouldn't exist. Soren hesitated, his jaw tightening, his eyes flickering with something like recognition, a shadow of fear he quickly buried. Maybe a vagrant. Or your mind playing tricks. You're exhausted, Livia. Come on. She wanted to scream, to shake him until he understood the terror of that smile, those unblinking eyes, that jerky dance that seemed to pull at her soul like a tide, but her legs were weak, and the memory of that laugh awed at her mind, leaving it raw and bleeding. She let Soren guide her toward their street, his lantern a frail beacon in the dark, its light barely holding back the shadows that seemed to writhe and whisper. The street lamps dimmed as they passed, their glow faltering, as if the light itself were afraid, retreating from something unseen, something that knew her name. At the boarding house door, Soren lingered, his hand on the frame, his eyes searching hers, a flicker of guilt in his gaze. "You sure you're okay?" he asked, his voice low, tinged with unease, as if he sensed more than he let on, as if he knew something he wouldn't say. Livia forced a nod, though her scar burned like a brand, the pain pulsing in time with her heartbeat, a rhythm that echoed the tapping she'd fled. "Just tired. Thank you." "Lock your door," he said, his tone sharp, almost urgent, his hand lingering on the frame as if he wanted to say more. "And stay off Dusk Alley. Promise." She bolted the door to her attic room, the space cramped and cold, its single window shuttered tight against the storm, the wood creaking under the wind's assault. She lit every candle, their flames trembling in the draft, casting jittery shadows that seemed to dance on the peeling walls, mocking her fear. She sank onto her cot, her heart still racing, her mind replaying that smile, those eyes, that grotesque rhythm that had nearly claimed her. It was her imagination, she told herself, overwork, the strain of endless hours at the Scrivener's, the weight of Grimholt's oppressive gloom pressing on her mind. But as she unclenched her fist, she saw the scar, a crescent moon, red and raw, pulsing with a heat that wasn't hers, as if it were alive, tethered to something beyond her, something that knew her. And she heard it, the tapping, faint but relentless, like a heartbeat in the walls, echoing through the room, refusing to let her rest, a rhythm that seemed to call her name. Morning draped Grimholt in a gray mist, the market square humming with a nervous edge that pricked at Livia's skin like needles. She moved through the stalls, her satchel heavy with bread and ink, catching whispers that made her scar throb with a searing heat, as if it were waking. Her Galt, the baker who supplied the Scrivener's shop, had vanished last night near Dusk Alley, his cart found overturned, loaves scattered like bones across the cobblestones, some crushed as if trampled in a struggle, others soaked in a dark liquid that wasn't rain. It was the 10th disappearance this month, a weaver, a tanner, a midwife, a blacksmith, a cobbler, a tailor, a seamstress, a butcher, 2 children, all gone without a trace, leaving only whispers and fear that clung to the town like damp rot. The market was quieter than usual, the vendors' eyes darting, their voices hushed, speaking of wolves, curses, and things that danced in the shadows. Livia sought Soren at his tannery, where he scraped hides with a grim focus, the stench of leather sharp in the damp air, the rhythmic scrape of his knife a counterpoint to the tapping that still lingered in her mind, a ghost of the night before. "Did you hear?" she asked, her voice low, barely audible over the scrape of his blade, her hands trembling as she clutched her satchel. "Her Galt's gone. Near Dusk Alley." Soren paused, wiping sweat from his brow, his expression dark, his hazel eyes shadowed with something like guilt, a weight he carried in silence. The town's scared. Some talk of beasts, others, something older, something we've buried too long. Livia leaned closer, her scar burning, the pain a constant reminder of the figure under the lamp. What I saw wasn't human, Soren. His face, his smile, it was like a mask, but alive, moving, tearing itself apart to show something worse underneath. Soren glanced around, ensuring no one overheard, then pulled her inside the tannery, the air thick with the acrid smell of curing hides, the shadows deep and heavy. Keep that quiet, Livia. You'll stir panic, and Grimholt's already breaking. But I asked old Thora, the herbalist, this morning. She knows stories about a figure who dances under street lamps, a shadow from Grimholt's past. They call him the Crooked Dancer. Livia's blood ran cold, her hand clenching around the scar, the pain flaring, sharp and insistent. What does he do? Marks people with his gaze, Soren said, his voice low, almost a whisper, his eyes darting to her hand, where the scar pulsed under her sleeve. A scar, like a curse. Once he does, you're his. Thora says he's tied to Grimholt's shadows, waking when the town's fear grows, feeding on it like a leech. Livia's heart pounded, the scar's heat spreading up her arm, a fire that felt alive, as if it were speaking to her, urging her to listen. We need help, Soren. Someone who knows more, who can stop him before he takes us all. Soren nodded, his jaw tight, his hands clenching the edge of a workbench, his knuckles white. Erin Falk, the archivist. She studied Grimholt's past, knows its secrets better than anyone. But she's reclusive, lives by the old mill, keeps to herself, doesn't trust easily. They found Erin in a crumbling house near the mill, its rooms stuffed with scrolls, ledgers, and maps, the air thick with the musty scent of dust and wax, the walls lined with shelves that sagged under the weight of Grimholt's forgotten history. Her sharp eyes, framed by gray braids, studied Livia over wire-rimmed spectacles as she recounted her encounter, her voice trembling as she described the dancer's smile, his jerky dance, the hum that pulled at her soul like a tide dragging her under. Erin listened without interruption, her fingers tracing a faded map of Grimholt, her expression unreadable, though her eyes flickered with a mix of curiosity and dread, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. You're not mad, Erin said finally, her voice dry as parchment, cutting through the silence like a blade. The Crooked Dancer is real. His name was Torin Felt, a performer centuries ago, betrayed by Grimholt's council. They drowned his troupe in the river, accusing them of witchcraft, of dancing with demons that brought plague and ruin. Torin survived long enough to curse the town, binding himself to a shadow entity, something older than Grimholt, older than us, something that doesn't die. Now he's part of the town, woven into its shadows, feeding on its fear, growing stronger with every scream, every vanished soul. Feeding? Livia asked, her mouth dry, her scar pulsing like a second heart, the pain sharp enough to make her wince, her hand trembling as she pressed it to her chest. Erin opened a ledger, its pages brittle and yellowed, the ink faded but legible, written in a hurried, desperate hand. He marks his prey with a scar, a brand that ties you to him, like a chain you can't see. The more you fear him, the stronger he grows, feeding on your terror, your despair, your doubt. He doesn't kill outright, he takes you, body and soul, into his darkness, into whatever hell he serves. The street lamps are his anchors, his eyes, his stage. That's where he hunts, where he's strongest, where he draws you in. Soren crossed his arms, his tanner's hands tense, knuckles white against the workbench, his voice low. How do we stop him? There's got to be a way. There's a ritual, Erin said, her eyes narrowing, her voice steady but laced with caution, as if she feared speaking it aloud. You'd face him under a street lamp at midnight, trap him in a circle of light and will, an octagram, to bind his power. But you'd need a marked soul as bait, someone to draw him out, to hold his gaze. And a sacrifice to break his bond, to sever him from Grimholt, from the shadow that sustains him. Livia's scar burned hotter, a fire that seemed to crawl up her arm, into her chest, her throat, choking her. What kind of sacrifice? Erin's gaze was unyielding, her voice cold as the stones outside, sharp as the wind. Someone must take his place, become the vessel for the shadow, or destroy his anchor completely, at a cost no one can predict. The journals don't say what it takes, only that it's heavy. That night, Livia barred her window and lit every candle in her attic room, their flames trembling in the draft, casting jittery shadows that seemed to twist into long limbs and jagged teeth on the peeling walls, mocking her fear. But as the clock struck midnight, the tapping started, sharp and insistent, from the street below, louder than before, as if the dancer were standing just outside, his boots on the cobblestones, his smile waiting. The hum followed, a low drone that seeped through the walls, through the floor, urging her to move, to dance, to surrender to his rhythm. She didn't dare look out, but the shadows on her ceiling morphed into a grotesque silhouette, its smile stretching across the room, its eyes boring into her, seeing her soul. Her scar burned, a searing pain that made her gasp, and she felt him, his eyes, his laugh, his pull, like a hand around her heart, squeezing until she could barely breathe. She clutched her cot, whispering prayers she barely remembered, her voice trembling as the tapping grew louder, closer, the hum a tide that threatened to drown her, to pull her under. Dawn silenced it, but the scar's pain lingered, a constant reminder that she was marked, chosen, hunted, her life no longer fully her own. At the market the next day, Livia met Hannah Galt, her Galt's daughter, a wiry girl with fierce blue eyes and a voice raw with grief, her hands trembling as she stacked loaves on her stall, her movements sharp and angry. "They're saying wolves took my father," Hannah spat, slamming a crate down, crumbs scattering like ash across the wooden surface, her breath visible in the cold air. "But I saw something on Dusk Alley last night, a man, dancing under a lamp. His smile, it wasn't right, Livia. It wasn't human. I ran before he saw me, but I felt him watching." Livia's stomach lurched, her scar throbbing with a heat that felt alive, as if it were responding to Hannah's words. "You're lucky. I wasn't." Hannah grabbed her wrist, her grip bruising, her eyes blazing with a mix of fear and fury, her voice low and urgent. "You saw him. What is he?" "The crooked dancer," Livia whispered, glancing around to ensure no one overheard, the market's buzz a distant hum against the pounding in her ears. "A curse, tied to Grimholt. We're trying to stop him, Hannah. We have to." "I'm in," Hannah said, her voice steel, her hands clenching into fists, her eyes burning with a resolve that bordered on obsession. "For my father. He doesn't get to take him and walk away." Livia led Hannah to Erin's house, where Soren and old Thora waited, the air thick with tension and the scent of old paper and wax. Thora, frail and stooped, her hands trembling with age, spoke of the dancer with a haunted look, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking his name might summon him from the shadows. "I saw him 50 years ago," she said, her eyes distant, clouded with memory, her fingers clutching a bundle of herbs as if they could protect her. "My sister was marked. We tried to save her, but he took her, left her shoes by the river, still tapping, like they were alive. He's Grimholt's sin, come to collect what we owe, what we've always owed." Erin spread her map across a cluttered table, marking Dusk Alley and the Old Mill Square with a quill, the lines stark against the parchment, like veins on a corpse. The ritual needs 8, 1 for each point of an octagram, she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words, her eyes scanning the group. We draw him out, trap him in the circle, and banish him to whatever hell he came from. But if we fail, he'll take us all, marked or not, and Grimholt with us. Soren's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists, his eyes dark with something unspoken, a secret that weighed on him like a stone. Livia's marked. She's bait? Erin nodded, her gaze unwavering, piercing, her voice firm. She'll call him. The rest hold the circle, keep him contained, no matter what he does. Livia's scar pulsed, a fire that made her flinch, her voice trembling as she spoke. What if I can't do it? What if I dance with him? You will, Hannah said, her voice fierce, her dagger glinting as she pulled it from her belt, the blade catching the candlelight, its edge sharp and hungry. Or we're all dead. The group grew with 3 more allies, each drawn by loss or fear, their faces etched with the weight of their own ghosts. Cale, a blacksmith with a steady hand and a scar from a childhood encounter with the dancer, his eyes shadowed with guilt for surviving when his brother didn't, his hammer a constant in his calloused hands. Maris, a midwife with a calm voice and a haunted past, her hands stained with herbs. Her sister taken by the dancer decades ago, her shoes left dancing by the river. And Jorvik, a gravedigger with a gruff demeanor and a limp, who'd seen the dancer's shadow in the cemetery years ago, his shovel stained with the earth of too many empty graves, his voice rough with suppressed fear. He marked me once, Jorvik said, pulling back his collar to reveal a faded crescent scar on his neck, the skin puckered and pale, a wound that never fully healed. I've been running ever since, but you don't outrun him. He waits. A new figure joined them, Alina, a young seamstress who'd witnessed the dancer on Dusk Alley but escaped unmarked, her skeptical eyes darting nervously, her hands clutching a skein of thread as if it could anchor her to reality. I don't believe in curses, she said, her voice trembling despite her defiance, her fingers twisting the thread until it frayed. But I saw him. That smile, it wasn't right. I want to help, if I can keep my wits. The disappearances surged, a cobbler, a miller, a boy, a girl, a priest, a tailor, a seamstress, a butcher, a lamplighter, a widow. Grimholt became a ghost town, its streets empty, its shutters bolted, the air heavy with dread that clung like damp rot, a miasma that choked the life from the town. But Livia couldn't escape. The tapping followed her, even in daylight, a rhythm that echoed in her footsteps, her heartbeat, her breath, a constant reminder of the dancer's claim. Street lamps flickered wherever she went, their light dimming, as if they were his eyes, watching, waiting. The hum was constant now, a drone in her mind, pulling her toward Dusk Alley, a siren's call she fought with every step, every breath. Her dreams were nightmares. Torin felt stood in her room, his smile splitting the dark, his voice a whisper that curled around her soul. Dance with me, Livia. You were born for this. She woke screaming, her scar burning, her body trembling with the urge to sway, to move, to surrender to his rhythm, her hands twitching against her will. At Erin's house, the group planned their fight, the air thick with fear and resolve, the walls seeming to close in as the candles burned low. Hannah sharpened her dagger, her hand steady despite the scar now blooming on her wrist, marked from a second encounter on Dusk Alley, her eyes blazing with a fury that bordered on madness. Soren gripped a hammer, its weight grounding him, his eyes dark with a secret he kept buried, his hands trembling when he thought no one was watching, his guilt a shadow that clung to him. Thora clutched a bundle of herbs, wolfsbane, sage, and rowan, their scent sharp and bitter, meant to ward off spirits, her hands shaking as she whispered old prayers, her voice frail but resolute. Cale held a forged iron chain, its links heavy, clinking as he moved, his scar flaring with memories of his brother's screams, his eyes haunted by a failure he couldn't forgive. Maris carried a vial of blessed water, its faint glow a fragile hope, her eyes shadowed by her sister's loss, her faith fraying at the edges. Jorvik gripped a shovel, its blade worn from years of digging, his knuckles white, his limp more pronounced under the weight of his guilt, his voice rough as he muttered about graves. Alina, still unmarked, held a rosary, its beads clicking in her nervous hands, her skepticism fraying as the tapping echoed in her mind, faint but growing, a sound she couldn't shake. Erin memorized her chants, her voice unwavering, her eyes sharp with a scholar's obsession, though a flicker of fear betrayed her, a crack in her resolve. Livia's scar was afire, her roll as beta weight that crushed her chest, her breath shallow as she fought the hum's pull, her hands trembling as she gripped the table. "We need to know why he's back," Livia said, her voice shaking as she stood over Erin's map, the lines of Dusk Alley and the mill square stark against the parchment, like a wound on the page. "Why now? Why us? What does he want?" Erin uncovered a hidden journal, its ink faded, its pages crumbling under her careful touch, the words written in a hand that trembled with fear. It told of Torin Felt, a performer whose troupe was drowned in the river by Grimholt's council for dancing with demons, their performances blamed for a plague that swept the town, leaving bodies piled in the streets. Torin, betrayed and broken, survived long enough to curse Grimholt, swearing vengeance as he bled into the river, his blood mixing with the water that carried his troops' bodies, his voice a scream that echoed through the ages. His pact with a shadow entity, something ancient, nameless, born of the earth's oldest darkness, bound him to Grimholt's street lamps, each one a piece of his soul, a beacon for his dance, a stage for his vengeance. "He wakes when the town's fear peaks," Erin said, her finger tracing the mill square on the map, her voice low, heavy with dread. "The mill square's lamp is his heart, the source of his power. Destroy it, and we might break him, but it won't be easy." "There's too many lamps," Hannah said, her dagger glinting as she paced, her scar pulsing with a heat that mirrored Livia's, her voice sharp with frustration. "And he's hunting us. I saw him again last night, near the bakery. He looked at me, and this," she held up her wrist, the crescent scar red and raw, pulsing with a life of its own, appeared before I could run. Soren's eyes widened, his hand tightening on his hammer, his voice low. "He marked you." Hannah nodded, her voice hard, her eyes burning. "I ran, but he's faster now. Stronger. He's everywhere." Thora's voice trembled, her hands clutching her herbs so tightly they crumbled, her eyes clouded with memory. "The mill square is where they drowned Torin. His blood soaked the stones, turned the river red. End it there, or not at all." Cale's face darkened, his scar burning anew, his voice low, rough with pain. "I was 10 when he marked me. My brother wasn't so lucky. I hid while he screamed, begged for me to help. I won't hide again." Maris's voice was soft but firm, her eyes distant, her hands steady despite the tremor in her fingers. "My sister was taken 20 years ago. Her shoes were left by the river, still moving, like they were dancing. I'll face him for her, for all of them." Jorvik grunted, his shovel leaning against the wall, his voice rough, his limp more pronounced as he shifted his weight. "I dug graves for his victims. One wasn't dead, screamed as I buried her, clawed at the dirt. I hear her still, every night. I won't let him take me. Alina's rosary clicked in her hands, her voice shaky but defiant, her eyes darting as if expecting the dancer to appear. This is madness. I didn't believe in curses, but I saw him, felt him watching. That smile, it's in my head now. I can't unsee it. Livia's scar burned, a pulse that matched the tapping in her dreams, now a constant presence even when awake, a rhythm that seemed to call her name. He's in my head, she said, her voice breaking, her hands trembling as she pressed them to her temples. He says I'll dance with him, that I belong to him, that I was born for his dance. Soren gripped her hand, his touch warm but desperate, his eyes clouded with something unspoken, a secret that weighed on him like a curse. You won't, Livia. We're in this together, all of us. He doesn't get to win. The group uncovered a second journal in the scrivener's shop, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, its pages stained with what looked like blood, the words written in a frantic scrawl. It hinted at a deeper truth. The council's betrayal was fueled by greed, stealing Torin's troops' relics, artifacts said to channel the shadow entity, objects of power that the council coveted for their own ends. One relic, a silver pendant etched with runes that seemed to writhe under the light, was buried beneath the mill square's lamp, tying Torin's curse to Grimholt, anchoring the dancer to the town's heart. If we destroy the pendant, Erin said, her voice heavy with the weight of discovery, her eyes scanning the group, we might sever his anchor, break the curse. But it won't be simple. The pendant is his heart, and he'll protect it. But Grimholt was unraveling, its streets a maze of fear and suspicion. A zealous priest, Father Brand, rallied a mob in the town square, his voice thundering as he accused the group of summoning the dancer, his eyes wild with fanaticism, his torch casting shadows that seemed to dance like the dancer himself. They're witches, he shouted, his congregation murmuring, their fear turning to anger. They've brought this curse upon us, invited the devil into Grimholt. Alina, still unmarked, became his target, her presence at Erin's house fueling his suspicions, her skepticism no defense against his accusations. The group hid, meeting in secret at the mill, their trust fraying as the tapping grew louder, the hum more oppressive, a constant pressure in their minds, a weight that threatened to crush them. They spent days smashing street lamps, plunging Grimholt into darkness, the town's glow fading as if it were dying, the streets cloaked in a blackness that felt alive. Each broken lamp weakened the dancer, but his wrath grew, his appearances bolder, more surreal, his dance a mockery of life itself. He haunted Dusk Alley, the market, the churchyard, the riverbank, even the edges of the town where the forest loomed, his smile a beacon in the shadows, his laugh a blade that cut through the night. Livia's dreams worsened. Torin Felt's voice was no longer a whisper but a command, his dance pulling her body even as she slept, her limbs twitching against her will, her feet moving to a rhythm she couldn't escape. Hannah's scar burned, her rage driving her to patrol Dusk Alley alone, her dagger drawn, narrowly escaping the dancer's grasp when he appeared, his laugh a storm that nearly broke her. Soren's protectiveness hid a secret. He was descended from the council that betrayed Torin, a truth he kept buried, fearing the group's reaction, his hands trembling when he thought of confessing, his guilt a chain heavier than Kale's. Kale's trauma resurfaced, his scar flaring with memories of his brother's screams, his chain rattling as he gripped it, his eyes haunted by a failure he couldn't forgive. Maris questioned her faith, her blessed water failing to repel the dancer's hum, her hands shaking as she prayed, her voice faltering. Jorvik's guilt drove him to confess. He'd buried a victim alive, mistaking her for dead, her screams haunting him, and he feared the dancer's vengeance was personal, a punishment for his sin. Alina's skepticism cracked, her rosary a lifeline as she felt the dancer's eyes in the dark, her unmarked status no longer a shield, her hands trembling as she clutched the beads. But a new threat emerged within the group. Kale's guilt had twisted into something darker. He'd been feeding information to Father Brand, coerced by fear of his scar, believing the priest could protect him from the dancer. A note, found by Hannah in Kale's satchel, revealed his betrayal, detailing their plans for the ritual. "You sold us out." Hannah screamed, her dagger at Kale's throat, her scar pulsing with rage, her voice raw with betrayal. "You gave him our plans, you coward." "I was scared." Kale shouted, his chain falling to the ground, his eyes wild, his scar burning as if it were alive. "My brother died because of him. I thought Brant could save me, save us." Soren pulled Hannah back, his hammer raised, his voice low, dangerous. "We deal with him later. The dancer first. We need him for the octagram." Livia's scar burned, her voice trembling but firm, her eyes locked on Kale. "You hold the circle, or you face him alone. Choose." Erin nodded, her eyes cold, her voice sharp. "He stays, but he's watched. We can't afford to lose another." One night, the group attempted a ritual in Dusk Alley, forming an octagram under a flickering lamp, their shadows stretching long and distorted, merging into a single, writhing mass. Erin's chant was strong, her voice weaving ancient words that trembled in the air, the syllables heavy with power. Livia stood in the center, her scar blazing, her body shaking as she fought the hum's pull, her feet twitching to the dancer's rhythm. The dancer appeared, his smile splitting the sky, his dance a frenzy of shadow and bone, his limbs bending in ways that defied reality, his eyes burning with a hunger that consumed all light. He marked Soren and Maris, their scars blooming, the pain driving them to their knees, their cries swallowed by the hum. Hannah's dagger grazed him, drawing a hiss of shadow, a sound like steam escaping a wound, but his laugh shattered the chant, the lamp exploding in a shower of glass that rained down like shards of bone. The ritual failed, the dancer vanishing, leaving the group shaken, their scars burning, the hum louder in their minds, a relentless tide that threatened to drown them. Erin uncovered a third journal, hidden in the mill's ruins, its pages stained with river water and blood, the words written in a hand that seemed to scream. It revealed the pendant's power, it held the shadow entity's essence, a piece of the darkness that sustained Torin, and only a marked soul could destroy it, at the cost of their own life. "One of us must sacrifice," Erin said, her voice heavy, her eyes meeting each of theirs, lingering on Livia's scar. "Or Grimholt falls, and the dancer takes us all, body and soul." Soren stepped forward, his hammer raised, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes, his secret spilling out like blood. "It's me. My family started this, my ancestor was on the council, helped drown Torin's troop. I'll end it, pay the debt." "No." Livia snapped, her scar blazing, her voice raw with desperation, her hands trembling as she grabbed his arm. "We destroy the pendant together. No one dies alone." Hannah's eyes burned, her dagger glinting, her voice a growl. "I'd rather die than let him win. He took my father, my brother. He gets no more of us." Kale's voice was low, his scar pulsing, his chain dangling from his hand, his betrayal a weight he couldn't shake. "I'm already marked. I owe my brother this. Let it be me." Maris shook her head, her vial trembling in her grip, her voice soft but resolute. "We all fight. No one faces him alone. That's how he wins." Jorvik grunted, his shovel planted in the ground, his voice rough, his limp more pronounced. "I've dug enough graves. Let's fill his instead," end this for good. Alina clutched her rosary, now marked with a faint scar that had appeared that morning, her voice shaky but resolute, her eyes wide with fear and determination. I was wrong about curses. He's real, and I'm in this now. I won't run. Thora's voice was frail, her herbs crumbling in her hands, her eyes clouded with memory. I've seen too many taken. We end this, or I join my sister in his dance. But Father Brant's mob grew bolder, their torches encircling the mill, their chants accusing the group of witchcraft, their voices a counterpoint to the tapping that haunted the night. Alina's new scar made her a target, the priest claiming she'd been corrupted, his followers closing in. The group hid in the mill's shadows, their plan unraveling as Kale's betrayal lingered like a poison. Soren's secret, his lineage, fractured the group further, Hannah's rage barely contained, her dagger twitching in her hand. You knew, she spat, her voice venomous. Your family did this, and you hid it. I was ashamed, Soren said, his voice breaking, his hammer lowered, his eyes pleading. I didn't want you to hate me. I'm trying to fix it. Fix it by dying. Hannah snapped, her scar pulsing, her eyes blazing. That's not enough. Livia stepped between them, her scar of fire, her voice firm despite the tremble. We fight together, or we lose everything. No more secrets. The town itself seemed to turn against them. The river swelled, its waters black and restless, spitting up bones and shoes that tapped on the banks, as if the dancers' victims were rising. Street lamps multiplied in the night, appearing where none had been, their light pulsing with a sickly glow, casting shadows that danced without bodies. The hum grew louder, a chorus of voices that weren't human, whispering names, Livia, Hannah, Soren, Kale. The group found a fourth journal, buried in the churchyard, its pages written in blood, revealing a conspiracy. Grimholt's council had never disbanded, their descendants, still powerful, guarded the pendant, knowing it kept the dancer at bay, sacrificing townsfolk to appease him. Soren's ancestor wasn't alone, others in Grimholt still served the shadow, and Father Brant was their leader, his zeal a mask for his role in the pact. He's protecting the dancer, Erin said, her voice cold, her eyes scanning the journal. Brant's family was part of the council. He's feeding the dancer to keep the shadow contained, to save himself. Then we take him down too, Hannah said, her dagger ready, her scar burning. No one gets to play God with our lives. By the 15th night, only the mill square's lamp remained, its light a sickly beacon that pulsed with malice, a heart beating in the dark. The group gathered, their resolve fraying, their scars burning, the hum a constant roar in their minds, a sound that threatened to unravel them. Father Brant's mob circled closer, their torches casting shadows that danced like the dancer himself, their chants a twisted hymn that echoed the hum. Erin's chant was a lifeline, Hannah's dagger gleamed, Soren's hammer was heavy, Thora's herbs smoked, Kale's chain clinked, Maris's water glowed, Jorvik's shovel was ready, Alina's rosary trembled. Livia's scar was a fire, her role as beta weight that crushed her, her breath shallow as she fought the hum's pull, her body trembling with the effort to stay still. At midnight, the square was a void, the street lamp pulsing with a light that seemed to breathe, its glow twisting into shapes that weren't there, faces, hands, eyes that watched. Erin began her chant, the air trembling, the ground quaking as if Grimholt itself were waking, its stones groaning under the weight of its sins. Livia stood in the octagram center, Hannah, Soren, Thora, Kale, Maris, Jorvik, and Erin at its points, their shadows merging into a single, writhing mass that seemed to pulse with the dancer's rhythm. The tapping came, a thunderous rhythm that shook the cobblestones, the hum or roar that tore at the air, a sound that felt like it could unravel reality itself. The dancer appeared, his smile splitting the sky, his dance a maelstrom of shadow and bone, his limbs bending in ways that defied flesh, his eyes burning with a hunger that consumed all light, his smile a wound that bled darkness. His gaze locked on Livia, and she swayed, her scars screaming, her body betraying her feet twitching to his rhythm, her hands trembling as she fought to stay still. "Livia, hold on!" Erin shouted, her chant faltering as the air grew colder, the ground trembling beneath them, the mob's chants rising like a tide. Livia clenched her fists, fighting the pull, her scar a blaze of pain that threatened to consume her, her voice raw with defiance. "Take me," she called, her words trembling but fierce. "Leave Grimholt. Take me and be done." The dancer laughed, a shriek that tore at reality, a sound that felt like glass shattering in her mind, and lunged. His hands, cold as death, grabbed her wrists, their touch burning like ice, pulling her into his dance, his rhythm a tide that swept her under. The world spun, the street lamp's light twisting into a nightmare vortex, a kaleidoscope of horror that showed her everything, drowning bodies in the river, their limbs twisted in dance, bloodied stones in the mill square, soaked with Torrhen's blood, the dancer's true form, a writhing mass of shadow and teeth, its smile everywhere, consuming her, consuming Grimholt, consuming the world. "Hold the circle!" Erin screamed, her voice nearly lost in the storm of sound, but Thora collapsed, her herbs scattering, her breath failing as she clutched her chest, her eyes wide with fear. Hannah slashed with her dagger, drawing a hiss of shadow, the blade sinking into something that wasn't flesh, a wound that bled darkness. Soren swung his hammer, Kale lashed his chain, Maris's water burned, Jorvik struck with his shovel, Alina's rosary glowed, but the dancer was smoke, untouchable, his laugh a blade that cut through their resolve, his gaze marking Maris, then Jorvik, scars blooming on their skin, red and raw, pulsing with his power. Kale froze, his old scar burning anew, his betrayal weighing heavier than his chain, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. Alina screamed, her rosary snapping, the beads scattering like tears, her new scar pulsing with a heat that matched Livia's, her courage crumbling under the dancer's gaze. Livia broke free, her vision swimming, her body trembling as she fought the dance's pull, her feet twitching against her will. She grabbed Erin's journal, its pages fluttering in the wind, and slammed it into the street lamp, shattering glass and plunging the square into darkness, the shards raining down like broken stars. The dancer's laugh grew, a storm that shook the ground, his form swelling into a towering horror of shadow and teeth, his smile a gaping wound in the night, his claws reaching for them all, the mob's torches flickering out one by one as if in fear. Soren tackled Livia, his back raked by claws that drew blood, his cry sharp and raw, his body shielding her from the dancer's grasp. Hannah stabbed, her dagger sinking deeper into shadow, her scream a mix of rage and terror, her scar blazing. Thora whispered a final prayer, her eyes closing, her body still, her herbs scattered like ashes. Kale's chain snapped, his body crumpling as he shouted an apology, his scar blazing, his betrayal forgiven in death. Maris's water failed, her vial shattering, her voice breaking as she called for her sister, her body falling. Jorvik swung his shovel, but the dancer's laugh pinned him, his limp leg buckling, his body collapsing, his scream echoing in the dark. Alina fell, her rosary lost, her scar of fire that consumed her courage, her body trembling as she curled into herself. Erin's chant faltered, her journal torn, her voice hoarse as she fought to hold the circle, her eyes wide with desperation. Livia crawled to the lamp's base, where a stone marked Torrenfeldt's grave, its surface etched with runes that glowed faintly in the dark, pulsing with a light that wasn't light, a darkness that lived. Beneath it, she found the silver pendant, its surface burning her fingers, the runes writhing like living things, the metal humming with the dancer's power. She smashed it with Soren's hammer, the metal screaming as it shattered, her voice a raw cry that tore through the night. Torin felt, "Be free." The ground split, a wail rising from the earth, a sound that tore at reality itself, shaking the square, the town, the sky, a scream that echoed through Grimholt's bones. The dancer's form collapsed, shadows bleeding into the crack, his smile dissolving into ash, his laugh fading into a silence that was heavier than sound, a silence that pressed against Livia's chest. The hum stopped, the tapping ceased, and Grimholt was silent, the air thick with rain and the scent of burned herbs, the mob's torches extinguished, their chants silenced as they fled into the night. Soren survived, his back scarred, his eyes hollow, his secret laid bare, his guilt a weight he'd carry forever, his hammer still clutched in his trembling hands. Hannah lived, her dagger bloodied, her spirit broken, her scars a map of her loss, her eyes staring into the distance as if searching for her father. Thora was gone, her herbs scattered, her body still in the square, her face peaceful in death. Kale's body lay crumpled, his chain broken, his betrayal forgiven in the sacrifice of his life, his scar faded but present. Maris vanished, her vial empty, her fate unknown, her voice a whisper in the wind. Jorvik was found dead, his shovel snapped, his face frozen in a scream, his body twisted as if caught mid-dance. Alina withdrew, her rosary lost, her scar faint but present, her eyes haunted by what she'd seen, her hands trembling as she hid from the world. Erin burned her remaining journals, vowing silence, and disappeared into the night, her house left empty, its maps curling in the damp air, its secrets buried with her. Livia's scar faded, but the tapping lingered in her dreams, a faint echo that followed her, a rhythm that knew her name. She left Grimholt, seeking peace in distant towns, cities with brighter lights, broader streets, but the shadows followed, relentless and patient. Street lamps flickered wherever she went, their light dimming, as if the darkness remembered her, knew her fears, her scars. In quiet moments, she saw flashes, a smile in the dark, a shadow dancing, a rhythm in the silence that wasn't there. And she heard it, faint but relentless, a sound that woke her in the night, her heart pounding, her hands trembling, the tapping of the crooked dancer, waiting for her to join his dance, his smile a promise that he was never truly gone, that Grimholt's sins would always find her.